In the early part of the 20th century, a really bad idea rocketed two brothers to international acclaim in the food industry. Dmitry and Fyodor Karamazov wanted to change air travel, but instead became the pierogi kings of Northeastern Pennsylvania. This week on the Carbondale Dispatch, we look at food and tourism, possibly the most unusual combination of topics ever found in a YouTube video. On February 15, 1898, the very first international airport opened here in Carbondale, Pennsylvania. It was the idea of the Karamazov brothers, Fyodor and Dmitry, the brain trust of the Karamazov clan. They had the idea that they could increase tourism to Carbondale, which had been founded about 40 years earlier. So they bought some land, built the airport, and just sort of sat back and waited for the money to roll in. As you might have guessed, for obvious reasons, it didn't. They held on for a few years, but in 1902 they decided to close the airport because the only thing that was actually thriving at the time was the duty-free shop. So they decided to close the airport and think of something else. Now, if they could only have hung on for one more year, the airplane would have been invented, and Carbondale might be a very different place. Now, if the name Karamazov sounds familiar to you, it might be because of the Karamazov brother pierogis that you have in your freezer. Dmitry and Fyodor had a younger brother named Alexei, who had no business sense at all, but he did like to eat. And he suggested to his older brothers that maybe a food business would be more appropriate. So the boys thought about it. They closed the airport and started making pierogis. They got rich, Carbondale was on the map, and the rest is history. Now you're probably wondering how two Russian brothers became rich and famous for selling what most people normally considered a Polish food. That all had to do with how they got to the United States in the first place. Their family boarded a boat filled with mostly Polish immigrants heading towards New York City. This was back in the 1880s, I think it was. You can look that up. While on board, their mother, Mrs. K, learned how to cook a lot of the dishes that the other immigrants on board were used to. And she became quite good at it. This set the boys up for their later fame and fortune when they began to be called the pierogi kings of Northeastern Pennsylvania. So they ditched the airport idea, which, let's face it, was a little bit ahead of its time, launched their pierogi business, and became the international big shots that we all know they aspired to be. Anyway, this video is not about the Karamazovs. This video is about air travel. If you sort of lost the plot so far. Anyway, I'm going to talk about a few things about air travel that I don't like, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you what my favorite airport so far is. All right, so let's get started about things I don't like about air travel. Number one, airline boarding processes. You're sitting around the waiting area, and all of a sudden, you'll hear an announcement that says you're now boarding the plane, and we're going to do it by zones, or groups, or numbers, or some other system that the airline has developed to get people on the plane. But they usually start with like privileged passengers that hold status with the airline, or families needing assistance, or whatever terms they use. So those people line up. Then they say that they're boarding, for example, Zone 1. And another small group of people will form a line. And then without any further announcements, that line will start to grow. and you're sitting there thinking you have a ticket that says Zone 4 or something like that. And you know, if the last people to board the plane actually wait until they're called, then it's unlikely that they're going to have any place to put the bag that they brought with them. Because you're getting on the plane after all the CarryOn Only rangers show up with their ridiculously oversized carry-on bags, which the airline apparently refused to do anything about. And the poor saps in Zone 4 are sitting there waiting their turn, and then they get the final boarding call, and you wonder what happened to Zones 2, 3, and 4. So airlines, wake up. If you're going to have a zone system on your boarding passes, here's an idea: use it. Number 2 is allowing the CarryOn Only rangers to carry on whatever they seem to want to carry on. Now, I know a lot of people after last summer, or I should say the summer of 2022, and the latest Southwest meltdown, is probably wary of putting a bag in the hold of a plane and just hoping that it shows up at the other end of their trip. I've done a lot of travel, and I've never once lost a bag. Never. And in fact, before I made this video, I checked. 99% of all bags that are checked at an airport actually end up at the destination, the proper destination, with the passenger that checked the bag. So this notion that I'm going to carry everything I possibly can onto the plane with me so it doesn't go missing, it's a myth. It's just a myth. And all it does is cause trouble for you, the airline, and every other person on the plane with you. So for Pete's sakes, if you have a bag that really needs to be checked, and I don't care what the airline allows, if you have a big bag, check it. Number 3, this one kills me. If you have to travel with your pet, don't dare bring it into the cabin. Airlines have made a colossal mistake in allowing people to bring cats and dogs into the passenger cabin with them. And they say, well, they're support animals or some ridiculous thing like that. If you need a pet to keep you company on the plane because you're afraid of flying, then my suggestion is take a bus. I don't want to sit next to an animal at all for any reason. It doesn't matter what the reasons are. I just don't want to do it. So if you have to take an animal on board, here's my suggestion. First, don't do it. And if you don't like that suggestion, then please fly first class. That way I know I'll never be sitting next to you. Is that insensitive? Yeah, I suppose it is, and maybe I'm ashamed of saying it, but I'm not apologizing for it. There are a sizable number of people that do not want to sit next to animals on an aircraft. Some of you might recognize this as the frozen over version of the Carbondale UFO crash site. I don't know how I ended up here. I started off my walk this morning thinking that I should walk more hills because yesterday I visited a friend's house for dinner at the top of Carbondale. You couldn't possibly get any higher, and was winded by the time I got up there. So I decided that I needed to start walking up hills more often rather than just on flats. So that's what I did today, and next thing I know, I'm at the Carbondale UFO crash site. There's a video I made about the Carbondale UFO crash, which occurred back in the 70s. Forget the exact year now, but if you wanted to see that video, you could just click on the link up above. The last thing I'm going to mention in this video that I don't like about air travel, I guess would have to be airports. Airports have, over the past few years, gotten really bad at providing transit services. And I say this because there are some airports that I really like, or used to like. Oh boy, I think I'm looking at bear tracks. Anyhow, the Narita airport in Japan, for example, used to be one of my favorites. It's not anymore. I had a 12-hour layover there when I flew back from Malaysia, early December. I flew from Kuala Lumpur to Narita, and then Narita to, I forget where, Boston, I think it was. And I was looking forward to my stay at Narita because it's, generally speaking, it always has been a nice airport to spend a substantial amount of time in. Not this time. Most of the shops that were there in the past were either not there anymore or closed. So you have 12 hours where you have a limited amount of choices for coffee or food or anything like that. It just wasn't a pleasant place to be for that amount of time. Apparently, because Japan was closed down so much for the pandemic, they did not have a lot of traffic at their airport. So a lot of the shops either went out of business or closed temporarily because of the pandemic. And by the time I got there in December of 2022, they had not reopened yet. Anyway, that was 12 hours of total boredom. I just spoke to a woman out walking her dog, and she confirmed that, yes, there are bears in this area, and that my assumption that bears at this time of year would be hibernating is probably not a good assumption, because several people have seen bears in this area in the last couple of weeks. So I guess I'm going to have to watch where I walk. I've done a lot of traveling over the last couple of years. I've been at a lot of different airports. And in this list, I'm not going to include regional airports. Just international, large airports in big cities that if you're flying from one country to another, you'll probably land. And if you're not where you want to be, you'll probably change a plane at that place and fly into somewhere else. So these are big airports. Number 3 is Incheon in Korea. It's big, but it's easy to get around in, and it has a lot of places that you can buy snacks, get just coffee. It has all the duty-free stuff if you're into that kind of thing. And it has a lot of places where you can just sit and rest. And I'm not talking about just chairs in waiting areas. These are actually lounge-type seats, which always seem to be available. I don't really know how they do that, because most of the time you would expect when you go to an airport and you're looking for a place to actually lay down in a lounge chair, that they would already be occupied. But every time I ended up at Incheon to change planes, I was always able to find some place that I could sit and lay down and rest for a while before I just wander around the airport some more. Number 2, Schiphol in Amsterdam. This is probably one of the most visually interesting places or interesting airports that you're going to go to. And if you're going to Amsterdam, you're probably going to get off, go into the city. I had a long layover there a couple of times. So it's easy to go through immigration, get on a train, and head to Central Station. And then you can wander around downtown for a while before you have to get back on the train and get back to the airport. The point is, it's very easy to get from the airport into town without too much trouble. And also at the airport, there's plenty of places to sit and rest, plenty of different kinds of restaurants, shops, snack areas, the usual thing you would expect at a large airport. My most favorite airport of any place in the world is Wayne County Airport in Detroit. If you've ever flown through Detroit or flown to Detroit, you know that the airport it's not big, but it's sort of a medium-sized airport, but it's ridiculously easy to move around in it It's got all kinds of shops. It's got the high-end places where you can buy, you know, these expensive chocolates or gifts in the duty-free area. But it also has areas where you can sit and relax. Not in the waiting area chairs, but areas where you can actually be comfortable for a long period of time without feeling like you're missing anything. If you come into the main area of the airport, there's a waiting area that has comfortable chairs, comfortable seating. There's 2 coffee shops right near it. There's sometimes a piano player there. And it's right in the middle of everything. You're not missing anything by being in that area. And there's all kinds of things. And if you've ever been to the Detroit airport, then you know what I'm talking about. It's a comfortable place to be. When I'm flying into Detroit and I have a couple hours, I actually look forward to it. So in the comments below, let me know what your favorite airports are, or what your pet peeves of air travel are. I'm interested to know, because I know that my ideas are not the same as everybody else. Anybody that travels probably has their own favorite ways to do it, and what airports you look forward to flying into and which ones you try to avoid. But anyway, in the comments below, let me know what they are. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Hey folks, remember, if you subscribe to this channel, all of your wildest dreams will come true. I'll show myself out.